In this episode, we talk about WhatsApp's decision to roll out ads on its platform and why it's doing so now. We also take a look at the US launching military airstrikes on Iran targeting some of its key nuclear facilities. But first, we talk about the clearance to build one of the biggest hydropower projects in the country. Hi, I'm Ichha Sharma, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. Earlier this month, the Environment Ministry's Forest Advisory Committee, or the FAC, gave in-principle forest clearance to the 3,000-megawatt Etalin hydel project in Arunachal Pradesh. This is one of the biggest proposed hydropower projects in the country and has faced strong resistance over the years from both environmental groups and tribal communities, mainly because of the massive forest diversion and tree felling it will involve.
Now, with this latest clearance, over 1,100 hectares of forest land in the rich and biodiverse Dibang Valley will be opened up for construction. In order to complete this project, nearly 2.8 lakh trees are also set to be cut down.
Now, this valley is quite biodiverse.
That's the Indian Express's Nikhil Ghanekar, who reports on environment for the newspaper.
It is home to several flora and fauna species, and simply put, that is one of the main reasons why it is so contentious, because of the quantum of forest land that it will require for its construction, the construction of a dam for the hydropower project, and the forests that will have to be cut down for this. And second reason is that in the Dibang Valley, there are multiple hydropower projects planned which are bumper to bumper. What this means is that they are planned one after another in a river valley. This is something that has also been seen in Uttarakhand's river valleys.
Now, what's worth noting is that this latest move marks a big shift from 2022, when the same committee had denied clearance, raising concerns about biodiversity loss and poor environmental assessments. In this segment, Nikhil tells us how this clearance came through and why this project, nearly a decade in the making, continues to face serious scrutiny. Nikhil, this project, like we mentioned, involves the diversion of a section of the state's Dibang Valley, which is considered a biodiversity hotspot. So, can you tell us what kind of ecological zone this valley is and why is it considered critical?
So, this is the area which is home to almost over 500 different species of birds, in fact, if I remember correctly. And it is also home to several mammals, several herbivores, and it is also home to tigers. In fact, the local Irumishmi community, the local tribe, they have a very close relationship with the tigers in their cultural and traditional understanding and what they believe in. The tigers are considered as brothers, rather, as part of the family. That is how they are revered. So they also have a cultural significance, the wildlife in this area.
Right, and now this Etalin hydel project has received in-principle forest clearance by the Environment Ministry. So can you tell us what that means, like when we say in-principle clearance?
So there are a certain set of procedures that any project developer has to follow when they seek clearances of two nature. One is the environmental clearance and the other is the forest clearance. Now, the environmental clearance, while it scrutinizes the impact of a certain project on the broader environment where the project is being cited, that has a separate law under which it is scrutinized, which is the Environment Impact Notification and the Environment Protection Act. Whereas the forest clearances are granted under the Forest Conservation Act. And the law says that any forest land which is being diverted or utilized for any non-forest activity, and non-forest activity essentially means that for industrial activity, for it might be road work, it might even be something as small as building laying a pipeline. So that is considered a non-forest activity, and for which you are breaking earth and felling trees. So in this process, there are a certain size of projects, and this is one of those categories, which is since it's a large project, they are scrutinized by the expert panel at the center, which is comprised of officials from the Ministry of Environment and some independent members who are co-opted. Once the in principle or clearance is essentially the first clearance that is granted for the project, after which they have to fulfill certain conditions. That is why it is known as in principle or stage 1. Now what this means is that if certain project developer is not fulfilling some of the conditions that are put in the stage 1, these pertain to compensatory afforestation, finding land for compensatory afforestation. If they are not fulfilled, then the stage 2 clearance can be halted at times. Typically, this happens in very rare cases, but it has happened in the past. So that is what is known as in principle clearance.
And Nikhil, what's interesting is that in 2022, the Forest Advisory Committee had rejected Etalin, but the same FAC approved this project this year. So what changed in between?
That's right. So that has been one of the most contentious part in this recent development, that in 22 December, this project has been appraised by the expert panel that I mentioned, the Forest Advisory Committee of the ministry, several times, almost 6 to 7 times since 2014-2015. In fact, it has also changed hands in terms of the company which is developing it. Earlier, it was being developed by Jindal company in collaboration with the Arunachal government, but later on the Satluj Jal Vidyut Nigam was the one who signed a memorandum of agreement with the Arunachal government to develop this project. And typically what happens during the appraisal or the scrutiny of the project, there are various studies that are sought. Subcommittees of these expert panels also visit the ground many a times to look at what is going to be the impact of the project. They also seek number of documents which are scientific literature to justify the project in a sensitive forest area. In 2022, what happened is that when they rejected or asked, or the proposal in its previous form, to be very precise, was scrapped, they said that you have to conduct 2 fresh studies. One is a study on biodiversity, and secondly, a cumulative impact assessment on the Dibang River Basin. Now, what does this mean? One is that you have to basically understand the activities involved in construction, such as blasting, tunneling, which are key components in a hydropower project, the felling of the forest itself, how all these cumulatively will have an impact on the biodiversity. Now, as far as the impact assessment on the river basin is concerned, they usually see what is the impact on fish species in the downstream areas, what is the impact on the needs of the people for their livelihoods in the downstream areas. That is why it was scrapped in 2022. But interestingly, what we see on the basis of government documents that are being available in the public domain, and also the documents submitted by the project developer, is that the clearance has been given on the basis of the previous biodiversity study itself, which the committee already had it at their disposal.
Right. And another interesting point is that in 2019, the Wildlife Institute of India had submitted a study which, eventually got debunked by the experts. But then how has the FAC still relied on that report for this clearance?
So the previous study of the Wildlife Institute of India, which curiously was actually funded by the developer when it was done, the committee continued to rely on that. And that was in fact a 4-month study, which is why eyebrows have been raised as to, without much having changed, this clearance was given eventually. And secondly, they said that the previous study that was done on biodiversity impacts, that was relevant enough even now, which was quite, one would say, puzzling, because then why would they ask for a fresh study?
And earlier you mentioned that a number of hydropower projects have been coming up in the region. Could you talk a bit about, how the government has been trying to tap into the area's resources to generate power?
Arunachal Pradesh has been trying to tap the river valleys for the hydropower potential. And as per government documents that were submitted and have been submitted over a number of times by not just the Power Ministry but also the Arunachal Pradesh government, preliminary studies that were done earlier, these are old studies that I'm talking about, by the Central Electricity Authority, the total power potential from hydro projects in the northeastern region was estimated to be around 58,971 megawatts, and of this 50,328 megawatts is in Arunachal Pradesh. Now, just to give a caveat again, this is not the latest study but slightly dated, but this has been also used in the justifications for locating the project in a forest area.
And Nikhil, in your piece, you also write about the local Idumishmi community. So can you tell us what happens, when forest land is community owned? Like, how is their rehabilitation or reinstitution handled under the law?
So that's an interesting question. Now, under our laws of forest conservation and forest protection, there are different kinds of forests. As we know, there is a protected forest network, which is the national parks and tiger reserves, where people are not allowed at all. There are restrictions, in fact, on how they are allowed. Adivasis who have been living in these forest lands and they have titles to show their continuous occupation of the land, they are the only ones who are allowed to essentially stay on these lands. Then there are other categories such as reserve forests and territorial forests. These are basically different divisions in which they are, and they have different degrees of protection. And then there are community forests which are essentially managed by the people, and they also have rights over them. They use their indigenous knowledge to maintain these forests. They use their indigenous knowledge for use of herbs, use of traditional plants for their livelihoods, for their daily needs, and they are also like a protector of these lands. So typically what happens is that when such lands are they are not necessarily areas where these communities are living in, but they rely on for their livelihoods, and accordingly they are supposed to get some kind of rehabilitation. That is what we understand.
But Nikhil, is there a recourse? Like, is there any institutional mechanism in place to challenge such clearances?
I mean, as far as the clearance process is concerned, obviously, yes, one can go to the National Green Tribunal, which is the country's environmental court, whose mandate is to look at the implementation of certain laws such as Forest Conservation Act, the Environment Protection Act. One can always approach the high courts of the country against these clearances, and environmental clearances and forest clearances are routinely challenged in the different courts of this land, and they are also routinely quashed, these clearances. So people do have legal recourses against such decisions, and we have seen instances in the past. I mean, there is a case that is being heard in the NGT currently of a power plant in Mirzapur in Uttar Pradesh where a thermal power plant's clearance was quashed. So yes, there is legal recourse available.
And now shifting from environmental concerns to ones around privacy. After being ad-free for years, WhatsApp, one of the most widely used messaging apps in the world, is finally going to roll out ads on its platform. The announcement came last week when the company, which is owned by Meta, said it will start showing ads in its status feature. This move is expected to affect WhatsApp's 1.5 billion daily users, majority of whom are in India. To understand why the company is making this shift, my colleague Shashank Bhargava speaks to Karan Mahadik, who writes about tech for the Indian Express.
Karan, we know that the founders of WhatsApp, Jan Koum and Brian Acton, they were strongly against advertising. In fact, Koum has said in the past that when advertising is involved, the user is the product. And even when Meta bought the company in 2014, they were staying away from ads. They thought that ads were not the right way to go. So talk about what has changed now.
So you're right, yeah. The embrace of advertising actually very much contradicts the vision of its co-founders, who just wanted to keep the app simple and ad-free. But then in 2014, Meta, which was then known as Facebook, bought WhatsApp for about $19 billion. So that was the price tag that WhatsApp came with. And shortly afterwards, I think 2 years or 3 years later, the co-founders left, and it's also speculated that they left because of this friction with Meta over ads. So it's right to say that the co-founders absolutely did not like ads. Since then, I think Meta has continued to build out WhatsApp with various features, and advertising has always been a model that they've considered as a way to monetize WhatsApp. Ads were always the most obvious answer. Ads are shown on Instagram, Facebook. I think last year they rolled out advertising on Threads as well. So advertising is sort of the go-to approach by Meta to monetize its platforms. And as early as 2018, when the company has been looking to put ads in the status feature. But then in 2020, there was also some internal fear about what that would do for users and how users would react. But then again, they've always in the background tried to explore this advertising strategy. And now they've officially come out and said that we will be putting ads in the status feature.
Right, and you mentioned that Facebook and Instagram, they've had ads for some time. But without ads, how does WhatsApp make money right now?
So how WhatsApp makes money is actually one of the most common questions that people have asked a lot of times, because all the features that you see, whether it's video calling, voice calling, recording, sharing photos and videos with your friends, all of that is free, right? So the most obvious question that comes up is like, how can all of this be free? And one of the reasons is that, it obviously helps to have a parent company like Meta, which is right now a very valuable company. It's a publicly traded company and it has various revenue streams. So for instance, it raked in about 160 billion in ad revenue from Facebook and Instagram last year alone. Initially, in the early days, WhatsApp experimented with a subscription-based revenue model where users had to basically pay $1 every year to access the app. And for some countries, that subscription fee would kick in from the second year onwards. But that was never seen as a long-term strategy because it was just $1. And so 2 years after Meta bought WhatsApp, they scrapped the subscription idea. So since then, they've also tried various ways to make money from WhatsApp. One of the biggest ways they've done that is through Business API. Business API is basically a service that lets any government or enterprise customer communicate with its target user at scale, right? So this can be, airlines and travel apps using WhatsApp to share like boarding passes and travel alerts. This can be e-commerce sites like Amazon updating you about your purchase and when it will be delivered. The governments across the world have also been using WhatsApp, including in India, to share information about their various welfare programs and so on. And the pricing of that is dependent on the region and as well as how many messages you send. That's the most primary revenue stream. The second is click to WhatsApp ads, which basically let businesses pay to include a link in their ads. And when a user clicks on that ad, they are directly taken to a WhatsApp chat with the business. And so that becomes an easier way for the business to communicate with you. And essentially that's the big picture vision of WhatsApp. They want all your communication to happen on that platform, and click to WhatsApp ads help in that way. And I think in 2023, Mark Zuckerberg revealed that click-to-message ads raked in about 10 billion revenue run rate globally. And the third one is WhatsApp Pay. So WhatsApp Pay has only been launched in select markets like India, Brazil, and Singapore, but not fully. And it's not really taken off as much as in a way that WhatsApp would have liked it to take off. But I do believe that it generates some revenue from that because it's free for individual users, but businesses need to pay a fee for payments received through WhatsApp Pay.
Okay, so the company has decided to roll out ads. But when they were making this decision, do we know whether a subscription model was on the cards at all?
Yeah, it was always on the cards because it was the most obvious answer. They've been looking at putting ads in WhatsApp for several years now. The question, I think, was where do you put it, right? Because you want to roll out ads in such a way that it doesn't ruin the user experience. And WhatsApp ads are very different from Facebook and Instagram, right? Because Facebook and Instagram are primarily social media platforms. They are social networking apps. WhatsApp is also a social networking app, but also where you communicate. It's more private and intimate, right? And you don't want to do something to ruin that user experience. So they have been very cautious in placing these ads and clearly stating that these ads will only be limited to the updates tab, which is where you have your status feature, the daily status feature that disappears after 24 hours, where you see your channels and so on.
Right, and one immediate concern that comes to mind is whether WhatsApp will go through my chats to specifically target ads for me, right? Like if I message a friend that I want to buy new headphones, will it then show me ads for headphones?
Right. Well, WhatsApp has actually been very cautious about that. In their announcement, they've mentioned multiple times that they will not use a user's personal messages, calls, and statuses to target ads to determine what ads they want to show you. And instead, they'll be relying on data points like where the user is, which city, the country, which language, as well as what WhatsApp channels are you following. So if you follow the Indian Express channel, the way you interact with ads once they're rolled out, that will also be used to show you better, more relevant ads. And there's also a caveat here. So if you're a user who has linked your WhatsApp profile in the account center to Facebook and Instagram, then what your activity on these apps and what ads you see there, your preferences, etc., will be carried over so that it will show you more relevant ads on WhatsApp as well.
And if one has done that, can they opt out? Can they delink this?
Yeah, so linking to Account Center is off by default. You can opt out anytime. And WhatsApp has also said that you can manage your ad settings, your ad preferences. And if you want information about why you're being shown a specific ad, you can also see that. You can also hide or report individual ads directly to WhatsApp.
And Karan, WhatsApp obviously is not the only communication app that is free. There are apps like Discord, there is Telegram, there's Signal, for example. How have they dealt with this issue?
It's interesting you mentioned Signal because as soon as WhatsApp made its announcement, the president of Signal, Meredith Whittaker, jumped on it and said, if you guys don't like seeing ads, because you can't completely opt out of WhatsApp ads, right? So she said, if you want an AI-free surveillance ad, clutter-free experience, then join Signal. And Signal is able to do that because they mostly run on donations. They don't have any investors. It's owned and operated by an independent non-profit entity. As for other apps, so Discord has a freemium model, which means that you can sign up for free, but some additional features, like if you want to play a specific game, that you have to pay a little for that. They have their own subscription package called Nitro, which gives you access to like high quality video streaming features and custom emojis and so on. Telegram is interesting because Telegram has tried everything. It has ads, it has subscriptions, it has raised a bunch of funds from investors, I think about $500 million last I checked. And more interestingly, it has tried to sell cryptocurrency. So it has a crypto token called Toncoin, which is a virtual currency that was partly built inside Telegram and is now run by outside developers. And it's also experimented with some crypto-focused ideas like allowing users to mine crypto on Telegram and exchange them through Telegram and so on. And as for Snapchat, most of its revenue comes from advertising.
And currently we understand that WhatsApp will also now allow users to pay to promote their channels. Could you talk a bit about that feature?
Right. So now if you're a follower of a specific channel, you have the option to pay a monthly fee and subscribe to your favorite channel to receive exclusive content from that channel. It's sort of similar to how members-only content on YouTube works. And then if you're someone who has a channel and actively uses this feature to share content with your followers, then you can pay WhatsApp in order to gain more visibility to channels. And channels has been exploding in growth outside of US in countries like India. So a lot of national and accounts are growing on channels. WhatsApp has been looking at giving users way to monetize this channel and like build a business around it since like last year, and now they've done that.
And in the end, we talk about the US's military offensive on Iran's nuclear facilities. Until now, the United States had stayed out of the direct military conflict between Israel and Iran, but that changed this weekend. On Saturday night, the US carried out coordinated strikes on 3 of Iran's most critical nuclear sites: Natanz, Fordow, and Isfahan. Speaking shortly after the attack, President Trump called the strikes a success, claiming the facilities had been completely and totally obliterated.
A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime: Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. Everybody heard those names for years as they built this horribly destructive enterprise. Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated.
In his address, Trump also called these strikes a message of strength and declared that now is the time for peace. Israel echoed that sentiment, with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu thanking Trump, calling the strikes bold and saying they would change history. Meanwhile, Iran, of course, has responded sharply. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi called the strikes a grave violation of international law, the UN Charter, and the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. He warned of everlasting consequences, saying Iran reserves all options to defend its sovereignty and people.
The Islamic Republic of Iran condemns in the strongest terms the United States' brutal military aggression against Iran's peaceful nuclear facilities. It is an outrageous, grave, and unprecedented violation of the fundamental principles of the Charter of the United Nations and international law.
Now, the three sites hit are key to Iran's nuclear program. Natanz is the main uranium enrichment facility operating just below weapons-grade levels with underground protection for its centrifuges. Fordow is buried under a mountain and is believed to be nearly strike-proof until bunker-buster bombs were reportedly used in these strikes. While the third site, Isfahan, houses labs and reactors, together they form the backbone of Iran's atomic efforts. Now, the strike was important not just for what was hit, but how it was done. The US used multiple B-2 stealth bombers to hit Fordow and Natanz with bunker-buster bombs, while Navy submarines fired more than 24 Tomahawk missiles at Natanz and Isfahan. Among the weapons was the GBU-57, a 30,000-pound bomb built to destroy deeply buried targets. It is key to note that just 2 days before the US strike, Trump had warned Iran to return to the nuclear deal negotiations or face consequences. And around the same time, the International Atomic Energy Agency had also formally censured Iran for the first time in 2 decades over its lack of cooperation with inspectors. You were listening to 3 Things by The Indian Express. Today's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar and produced by Shashank Bhargava and me, Ichha Sharma. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Audio and write to us at podcast@indianexpress.com.